This Friday, Jamie Lee Curtis and Lindsay Lohan are back to switch things up in Disney's Freakier Friday.
Totally, yes.
It's an absolute riot.
Woo!
And the only movie that can be described as...
So much weirder than the last time. What last time?
It's the frequel.
You ready?
We've been waiting for.
That absolutely slays.
What deeply out-of-touch old person came up with that?
You did.
Wow.
Don't miss the comedy event of the summer for all ages. Disney's Freakier Friday. In theaters this Friday. Get tickets now. Rated PG. Parental guidance suggested.
This episode is brought to you by the world's first reposado from Tequila Herradura. Made with slow-cooked, hand-harvested agave sealed into oak barrels and aged 11 months. Before being enjoyed in your glass. Experience the world's first reposado. Tequila Herradura. Please drink responsibly. Responsibility.org. Tequila Herradura. 40% alcohol by volume. Imported by Brown-Forman, Louisville, Kentucky. Herradura is a registered trademark. Copyright 2025 Brown-Forman Corporation.
So good, so good, so good.
Ready to rack to school and save big? Get to your Nordstrom Rack store today for thousands of deals from just $20.
Because I want to look fresh.
How did I not know Rack has Adidas?
I got a new backpack.
Score everyone's favorite denim, sneakers, boots, and activewear from Nike, Levi's, Steve Madden, Madewell, and Free People. Great brands, great prices. Everyone's got a reason to rack. Shop Nordstrom Rack and make it the best school year ever.
Pie in the Sky Media. This series contains adult language and descriptions of graphic violence throughout. Listener discretion is advised. The views and opinions expressed in this podcast are simply that. All are presumed innocent unless proven otherwise in a court of law. Welcome back to Criminal Mischief with Cariolyn and Brandon. You're listening to episode 109, The Murder of Mary Schlais.
On February 15th, 1974, Mary K. Schlais was found deceased in the township of Springbrook, Dunn County. Mary's death at the time was ruled a homicide. I'm happy to report that John K. Miller is in custody here in the Dunn County Jail for her murder 50 years later. I can't thank Karen and David from Ramapo College enough for their assistance in this case and for being here today.
Recently, my co-host, Brandon Morgan, sent me a link to a cold case investigation. There had been some breaking news about an identification of a suspect that had led to an arrest in the murder of Mary Schlais. This after a tireless investigation from generations of Dunn County police detectives in Wisconsin. The arrest was a group effort which included the help of Investigative Genetic Genealogy. Here, Karen Binder from Ramapo College discusses some of that work.
It should be known that it takes a village to solve a case like this. To that end, we have a number of people to thank. The laboratory, Intermountain Forensics, who provided advanced DNA testing and bioinformatics services for this case, Family Tree DNA and GEDmatch Pro for the use of their databases, the DNA relatives in those databases who made their profiles available for IgG searching and who cooperated with this investigation, our case manager and our volunteer researchers at Ramapo College IgG Center, and finally, our donors and supporters who made this work possible. Also, the investigating agencies in Minnesota and Wisconsin who never gave up on this case.
On today's episode, I want to go a little bit behind the scenes as it relates to investigative genetic genealogy and what draws people, like the woman you just heard, Karen Binder, to this kind of work. Because when Brandon sent me the link to this story as a potential episode for Criminal Mischief, he had no idea that I was very familiar with the work of investigative genetic genealogist Karen Binder, and that over the course of the last few years, I'd interviewed her on multiple occasions related to several different cases.
Thank you so much for spending your weekend doing an interview on this case with me. I really appreciate that.
No problem.
If you want to start off by saying your name and title, we'll get right into it.
Sure. My name is Karen Binder, and I'm an investigative genetic genealogist with DNA Doe Project.
So that clip was from the first interview after I had reached out to the DNA Doe Project when it was announced that their work had helped identify the remains of Wendy Stevens, a 14-year-old girl whose skeletal remains had been recovered in 1984 from a swamp behind a baseball field near the SeaTac airport, and that these unidentified remains had been known as Bones 10 one of 49 known victims of the Green River Killer. During this interview, I was impressed by Karen's tenacity and passion for using genetic genealogy to help solve cases, while at the same time acknowledging the hard work of investigators.
You know, a lot of times recently with genetic genealogy being so prevalent in our society now, and it's solving a lot of cases, a lot of crimes. So I think the first thing to just note is all of the work that investigators do before we come in. For example, if I didn't have any idea how old Wendy Stevens was when we got that case, that would make it a lot harder to do the genetic genealogy, because am I looking for somebody that was born in 1960, or am I looking for somebody that's born in 1920? So for example, the forensic anthropology work that goes on before we get the case is really valuable to what we do. And all of the other investigative work, where do we think this person came from? Did they have anything in their pockets that would indicate they came from a different state? All of that is really useful to us when we start the genealogy process. So for anyone that thinks that investigators should just jump in and start genetic genealogy for all their cases, I would never want to undervalue all of the work that goes in that the investigators do before we pick up the case.
During our interview, I connected with Karen on a personal level. How researching these cases from afar doesn't mean you don't get emotionally involved.
And how did that feel when you found that match? Like, just take us there. What, you know that this is a historic case. You know that, I mean, I'm sure every case is important to you, but I would imagine that this maybe had a little bit more significance, or maybe it didn't. Maybe you, like, what was your process? What were you feeling?
So my partner that I always work with on cases and we both have teenage daughters. So it's this one was hard because my daughter's the same age that Wendy was when she went missing. And so imagining the struggle of her mother and just what it would be like to be searching for her all those years and not have those answers. This one was like probably one of my most difficult cases emotionally because of that sort of connection. So it wasn't, a lot of times we're really excited to be able to provide that closure. I would say that this one felt a little bit darker because it's just really sad how her life was taken from her.
Yeah, I mean, I see you getting emotional. I get really emotional because not only do I have daughters that are the similar age, but also I think of myself at that age and I was at risk. And that's part of the kind of the thing that really kind of motivates me on this case is trying to bring the victim story to light, which is difficult when there's 49 victims.
I learned from Karen how her work has been influenced by her own childhood trauma. Over the course of conversations, I was still researching the Shadow Girls podcast, which was a deep and extremely dark dive into the Green River Killer investigation from the victim's perspective. At the time, Karen gave me some great advice to be mindful of my mental health. I mean, it should go without saying that these cases aren't about us, but we're human and we draw parallels to our own lives. How can we not?
What are your thoughts on how it's impacted you kind of personally as you do this work? Because I remember you saying, I hope you're getting mental health. Because when we talked, I was so in deep in it. And it was just like, I was like, gosh, she's so right.
Well, the more I uncover about these like John and Jane Doe cases, I'm just like, wow, I'm so lucky that I didn't get murdered. I'm so lucky that I didn't get kidnapped. I'm so sorry. I'm lucky I didn't get trafficked. I feel like even a little bit of, I don't want to say survivor's guilt, but a little guilty that something worse didn't happen to me, because there's other people that were doing the same things that I was doing and like their outcome wasn't the same as mine. So I feel like it's not really fair. But yeah, I mean, I definitely have required help with like my own trauma because I didn't necessarily like realize how much I had until I uncovered it.
For Karen, in working to identify John and Jane Does, for her, it's really important to give unidentified homicide victims their names back.
I'm going to pivot to why we originally set up the call, which was when you said to me, when I was talking about the GRK case and I just the cyclical nature of domestic violence and, seeing these patterns. And you said that you see it in your work too. Talk a little bit about that, because you said it was such kind of sorrow. And
I have a couple of John Doe cases that I've worked, but I mostly work Jane Doe cases. And that's probably because I'm interested in working them because I feel like I'm helping them with getting their name back and taking part of their identity back. And a lot of them are homicide victims. A lot of them were sexually assaulted. A lot of them grew up in abusive households. A lot of them, the things that you uncover when you're doing genealogy work, it's really amazing because sometimes you'll uncover that the father was arrested for like domestic violence, or you'll uncover, that dad wasn't really dad, or mom wasn't really, like grandpa wasn't really grandpa. There's like so many things that you uncover that not even like the contemporary people probably knew at the time, like the people involved in the actual family situation. They might not have known some of the things that we end up uncovering in our work.
I went to Karen again for her expertise on a different podcast series I was researching. Admittedly, it was an odd request, but she was totally in. I wanted to see if she could try to confirm the lineage of an infamous Seattle bank robber, Scott Scurlock, aka Hollywood, who had made claims that he was a descendant of the infamous Doc Scurlock, who rode with Billy the Kid.
But it appears, based on my brief research, that Josiah Scurlock, also known as Doc Scurlock, his grandparents, John Joshua Scurlock and Elizabeth Norman, are also fourth great-grandparents to William Scott Scurlock, aka Scott Scurlock, aka the Hollywood Bandit. So that makes them second cousins 3 times removed, if that's accurate.
I love that.
Which is all to say that during these interviews, I really enjoyed connecting with Karen through the intersections of our work. In my part, through storytelling, and Karen's investigative genetic genealogy, in as much as one can get to know someone over multiple Zoom calls. But the last time I spoke with Karen, she shared about how she was at an important juncture in her life, about to take a leap of faith on a new journey. At that time, I didn't know that she was talking about moving to New Jersey and helping to start a new investigative genetic genealogy center at Ramapo College.
So we'll see what happens.
Yeah, no, it's hard building something from the ground up, but when it takes off, it'll really be worthwhile. So I'd bet my money on you. Anybody who's ever been successful has always had naysayers say, "Oh, it's never going to work. You can't da-da-da-da." And it's like, that's just fuel to be like, yeah, I'm going to make it happen.
Absolutely. My haters are my fuel.
So full circle, when Brandon sent me the link to the announcement that a suspect had been identified in this more than 50-year-old unsolved murder case, and I saw Karen's name connected to the investigative genetic genealogy team that helped crack the case, I was really excited to hear her being acknowledged for her and her team's work at a recent press conference.
I'm happy to report that John K. Miller is in custody here in the Dunn County Jail for her murder 50 years later. I can't thank Karen and David from Ramapo College enough for their assistance in this case and for being here today.
So we'll get to the investigative genetic genealogy and how it relates to the identification and arrest of a suspect in this cold case. But for now, let's review what we know about the circumstances behind the murder of Mary Schlais in February of 1974, which admittedly, despite an arrest, when it comes to the details of the investigation, they're pretty spare.
However, again, just remember that we can't get too much more into details about this case, so Mr. Miller has an opportunity to receive a fair trial here in Dunn County.
Sergeant Jason Stalker would give a summary of the facts, leading up to 25-year-old Mary Schlais's body being found dumped in a rural area of Dunn County, Wisconsin.
On February 15th, 1974, Mary Schlais was found deceased on the side of a rural Dunn County road in Springbrook Township. Mary was found with multiple stab wounds, and her death was ruled a homicide.
During the course of the investigation, detectives would learn that Mary lived in Minnesota and that she'd left home to hitchhike her way from Minneapolis to Chicago for an art show. But Mary never made it.
Early in the investigation, investigators had an eyewitness statement providing a suspect description and vehicle description.
A composite sketch was made and circulated, but in the 1970s, that's pretty much all they had. Somebody who thought they'd seen a suspicious guy, and then several items of evidence, including a stocking cap.
One piece of evidence found at the crime scene was a stocking hat. Investigators at that time knew the hat would be important to the investigation, but probably not in the way we were able to utilize evidence from this hat nearly 50 years later. Prior to DNA technology, the stocking hat was only able to be utilized for human hair comparisons. Multiple leads, tips, interviews, and hair comparisons were done over the course of the next several decades. However, no viable suspects were identified. As DNA technology advanced, There was eventually a partial male profile developed from the scrapings from this stocking cap. That profile was entered into CODIS, otherwise known as the Combined DNA Index System, and there were no matches. This meant our suspect's DNA was never entered into the system, and his identity would remain a mystery for now. Investigators from our agency even went to the extent of exhuming Mary to try and obtain new evidence and develop new leads.
But something changed in 2022.
My name is Karen Binder, and I'm the Assistant Director of the Investigative Genetic Genealogy Center at Ramapo College of New Jersey.
And David.
My name is David Gurney. I'm the Director of the Investigative Genetic Genealogy Center at Ramapo and a Assistant Professor of Law and Society.
Also, a bit later, Tracy would join the team.
My name is Tracy Boyle, and I am the Case Manager at the Ramapo College Investigative Genetic Genealogy Center.
So in 2022, Karen and David were given the green light at Ramapo, a nonprofit state college in New Jersey, to start a new investigative genetic genealogy center to provide pro bono IgG services to law enforcement agencies around the country.
So we were very fortunate when we started back in 2022 to have some local donors who are big boosters of Ramapo, who also happen to be very interested in genealogy. And one of them, in fact, took the class that I was teaching at the time before the IgG Center even got off the ground, and was just enamored with the possibilities of IgG and how bringing it to Ramapo could make a real difference.
The work really feeds itself, because I think one of the biggest draws of our certificate program is that students get to work on real cases. And in order for us to be able to pay for cases, students need to sign up for the program. So I think that's a positive feedback loop. The more we solve cases, the more students want to join. By joining, they help solve more cases because the funding that they give for tuition goes right back into the program.
So how did this go from a fledgling program in 2022 to helping to solve a major cold case in 2024? Hard work, dedication, and cold calling law enforcement agencies with an incredible pitch. They offered their services for free to authorities to help with cold cases that have DNA evidence that could benefit from investigative genetic genealogy.
When we began the IgG Center at Ramapo, I began trying to procure cases. This is when we were made up of just 2 staff members, myself and David. And so we were cold calling a lot of agencies in the Midwest and also in the states where we had lived in the past. So David's originally from Minnesota, I'm from Arizona. We were touching those states and then every state around them. So I made a few calls to Wisconsin.
Fortunately, news spread that Ramapo College in New Jersey was offering to help with cold cases with no strings attached. And so Karen got a call in the fall of 2022 from Dunn County. Hey, Criminal Mischief Nation, ready or not, the holidays are here. See how confident I'm trying to sound? But the reality is I pretty much always procrastinate this time of year, especially when it comes to a gift for my husband, who's always like, I don't need anything, just focus on the kids. And then he transitions into asking me what I want, which of course makes me want to get him something really special. I always want to every year, and every year the struggle is real. But this year, I'm pretty excited because I'm ahead of the season and I want to share my good fortune with you. I got my guy something I knew that he would really love, or at least I hoped he would, because we have all these holiday parties coming up, and a nice clean shave with just the right amount of cologne. It's just a simple look that doesn't ever go out of style, if you know what I mean. Enter the Chairman Pro electric foil shaver from Manscaped. The Chairman Pro shaver is like Santa's elves made it just for him. I'm not kidding. Between the blades and pivoting head, which seamlessly adjusts to every curve of his face, and the proof is in the pudding, because I've felt it, a really smooth, irritation-free shave. And another thing about the Chairman Pro that's super cool is that my man doesn't shave every day. So the Chairman Pro is perfect for him because it's powerful enough to tackle up to 5 days of stubble. So this holiday season, gift your man with the ultimate grooming experience by Manscaped and get him the Chairman Pro package for the holidays. It's a thoughtful, practical gift that he'll actually look forward to using. And this week, you're just in time to take advantage of Black Friday savings. Get 25% off plus free shipping with the code MISCHIEF, that's MISCHIEF, at manscaped.com. You can't beat it. 25% off plus shipping with the code MISCHIEF at manscaped.com.
Juvederm Day is coming on August 20th. For one day only, buy one $75 gift card and get one free. Juvederm Day gift cards can be used on any product in the Juvederm collection of fillers. Don't miss out on this once-a-year chance to save. Join Allie now while supplies last. Skin Beef by Juvederm is excluded from this promotion. Terms and conditions apply.
Okay, so this is cool. So you guys are offering your services to them, cold calling for free to help them with their cold cases.
That's right. That's our goal is to sort of take a load off of law enforcement. So we're able to unburden them financially in many cases. And in terms of the work that we do, we provide the case management services. Tracy Boyle is our case manager, the laboratory work, which we're often paying for as well, and the genetic genealogy. So all the way from sample selection through lead provision.
You know, I think this is changing, especially with the success of IgG and just, you know, law enforcement can see the power of it. What's your pitch? And do you run up against, you know, that whole thing of we can't share information, this is an active investigation, you know, fill in the blank?
Tracy, you want to answer? Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
Tracy, go ahead.
I've been surprised at how open sometimes law enforcement will be. I mean, obviously they don't want to jeopardize the investigation, so they are closed off about some things, but they do let us in a lot on the case and give us a lot of details that will help us figure out whether or not there's good evidence that can be tested. And oftentimes Karen and David come in because they're, you know, much better at doing presentations. And then they will present that we provide funding, you know, pro bono, whether we do just the genealogy or we also pay for the lab work. They kind of question us like, what's the catch? And we're like, there is no catch. We just want to help get these cases solved.
To be clear, the college has different ways of approaching cases. For criminal investigations, all the work is done in-house by their small team of staff. And for other cases, like unidentified human remains, they utilize volunteers who have gone through their certificate program. In the pitch to law enforcement agencies, they made it clear that Ramapo College has an in-person investigative genetic genealogy laboratory that's a secure space and that the labs that they work with are accredited. Proof that all the IgG work that they provide would stand up if a case went to trial.
Law enforcement wants to solve these cases. And even the cases like Mary Schlais' case from 1974, it's been sitting there for 50 years, but they've had investigators working on it all that time. Even as people retired, new investigators picked it up. So they're always looking for new ways to bring resolution to that case. One of the things I think that makes the law enforcement agencies that we've worked with so special and so effective is that they recognize the areas where they are the experts. And they also recognize the areas where they need to reach out to other people and lean on them for their expertise. So being able to do that, to sort of give up the ego, is one of the things you need to do to be able to incorporate IgG into your casework. And we've been very fortunate to work with agencies that are extremely grateful to get that expertise, because ultimately they don't care about getting the kudos in the end. As you saw in the press conference, they were happy to share that with us, even though our role was relatively minimal, given the timeline and how much effort went into this case. They just wanted to get it solved.
From authorities, we know that the suspect admitted to murdering Mary.
John Miller was found to be the contributor through IgG of the DNA collected from the crime scene. An interesting part about this date, which was November 4th of 2024, also would have been Mary's 76th birthday. On November 7th, 2024, we interviewed John Miller at his home, where he subsequently confirmed his involvement in the death of Mary Schlais.
However, since the case has yet to be adjudicated, Karen says there are still details about the investigation that they can't speak about. But according to the Ramapo team, Dunn County sent a piece of evidence from their investigation to a lab that Ramapo works with.
So in this case, there was a DNA sample that was derived from a stocking cap that was related to the crime scene. And so that is the evidence that was tested. But since we're not a laboratory, we never came in contact with any of that evidence. We just facilitated it being tested by the lab. And then our work started with the genealogy later on after a profile was developed from that specimen.
Karen and Tracy went to work developing a family line through the DNA profile that had been obtained from the stocking cap, which had been left behind at the crime scene. From that work, a lead was developed, and Karen and her team passed along the name of a man who had lived near the crime scene at the time of the murder, and investigators in Wisconsin went and knocked on his door in Wyoming.
So early on in the case, we were able to develop a candidate based on the available DNA matches in the databases that we can access. And that candidate was a person that lived close to where this crime occurred and seemed like potentially, a candidate for the contributor of the DNA profile. Law enforcement tested that person and were able to determine that he was not the contributor of the DNA profile, and nor was anyone in his immediate family.
Another candidate was developed, and his name was passed along to Dunn County investigators, who went to collect a DNA sample from him as well. This time they went to Michigan, and this man was the first cousin to the man in Wyoming.
There was only one other male in the family line that was a possible contributor of the DNA. And so they tested that individual as well. And he was also ruled out as being the contributor of the DNA profile.
Now, you might be thinking this would be a dead end, but it wasn't.
When you cross all the males out on the list of family tree members, that's what told us that there had to be perhaps an adoption or a misattributed parentage event in the family.
Wait a second, what is that misattributed parenting event?
Misattributed parentage is another word for a person's parents on paper are not their biological parents, but it doesn't only apply to the man being the wrong father of an individual. For example, if my oldest child had a child and then I raise that child as my own because of my child's age, that would be an example of misattributed parentage. And it's actually quite common. That's called kinship adoption. But other, the mailman's baby is a common phrase that we hear. Mm-hmm. The milkman, I think is really it. But there's a lot of babies that are born with different parents than what they're expecting on paper.
So an adoption was a disruptor in this family tree as it relates to investigative genetic genealogy.
So when we provide the lead, we would have given law enforcement the name of the first candidate and to rule him in or out. We had also mentioned that there was a potential second candidate who was less likely just due to some admixture, was different than the suspect. And then at the same time, we had said, we can't rule out that there was a child given up for adoption at any point. So we can only see in the family tree what's documented on paper, but we won't know if there's necessarily an adoption until we rule out all these other trees or all these other options that are paper options.
Okay, so that the suspect could have been adopted outside of that family tree to some other tree.
Yes.
Okay, got it. Okay, perfect. Thank you.
So the two leads we provided were in the tree, but we always said that there's a possibility that we may not be able to see him due to lack of paper trail.
Okay.
Even in a case where we are able to identify what we call the union couple, which is going to be the parents of the person we're trying to identify. Even if there's only one male son and it's a violent crime case, say, we could turn that name over to law enforcement, but that is not evidence beyond a reasonable doubt by any means, because there's always the possibility that those parents had a different child, perhaps before they were married, or for whatever reason they had that child and gave it up for adoption. You can never rule that out. And this is one of the reasons that we are so emphatic that IgG is only a lead. It's a tip. It should not be used. It is not enough on its own to go into court and say, well, the genealogy shows that you fit into the tree here. No, it's that confirmatory DNA test based on the lead that we turn over. Law enforcement goes out and tests either the individual or a close family member. And that's what shows that we're either right or we're wrong.
Now, I was super curious to know about how the team narrowed in on the suspect if there had been an unknown adoption.
How did you get to the suspect then, if he wasn't in this line?
So this part we really can't go into detail at all. I'll just I think that the only thing that we can say is that Tracy and David and I are all experienced adoption researchers. The nature of our work brings us to adoption searches all the time. It's actually the reason why I got into genetic genealogy in the first place, was to solve my mother's adoption. So we are experienced at looking for things in people's family trees that indicate that they could be adopted or that they're searching for a biological family. And so in a person's family tree, we were able to see those clues, and that's what brought us on the right path.
Well, I just wanted to add that this case was really difficult. And I think Karen is being a little bit modest here, because it took Karen's insight to figure out the right way to approach this. And then it took Karen and Tracy, their extreme dedication to this case and hard work to get there. This is not a case that could have been solved by any IGG team. It took people like Karen and Tracy, who are extremely experienced and dedicated and just brilliant genealogists, to do this. I think the training that our students gets them in a place where they could do this kind of work, but not everybody is going to be able to have those insights that Karen and Tracy had here. It's not something you can get, for example, by taking a week-long training course. You really need to delve into these cases to understand the kinds of clues. You need to know what you're looking at, right? Two researchers might see the same pieces of information, but only one of them is going to understand the meaning of those pieces of information.
But Karen and Tracy would give me some insights into their collaboration.
So, okay, since we can't specifically talk about it, let's talk about a movie reference. If this was a movie, do you have like strings like all over the place, and you guys are like, oh my gosh, this piece of paper connects with this piece of paper over here on the other side of the room? Is that the kind of feeling that it is? Like you guys are working together?
Because our brains are just, they capture it all. We don't need to have the string in the paper.
Like Karen, I'm the guy with the tinfoil hat with the.
Well, the comparison that we now have in our pocket is the cast of Buffy the Vampire Slayer. So that's we're out there, slaying vampires.
We're the Scooby Gang.
I love it. I love that.
But and so you asked, is this what we teach in our class? I would say that what was required for this case really goes above and beyond what we teach in our class, because it had this unknown parentage element. What we're teaching in our class is a 15-week class. We don't have time to get into every cul-de-sac of potential research. And so we basically teach how a typical case goes. And this case was extremely atypical given the adoption. But we were able to come to a conclusion eventually.
The candidate that they came up with was 84-year-old John K. Miller from Minnesota.
We were excited, but there's always that nervous aspect, because if there's one adoption, there could be two. And we weren't 100% sure if this was the adoption that we were looking for. We assumed that it was, but it said you don't know. So we crossed our fingers and hoped that this was it. And when they were able to confirm, we were pretty excited that it was correct. And we're looking forward to what happens next and hopefully get some justice for Mary.
On November 7th, 2024, the Dunn County Sheriff's Office investigators arrested 84-year-old John Miller for the murder of Mary Schlais.
On February 15th, 1974, Mary Schlais was found deceased in the township of Springbrook, Dunn County. Mary's death at the time was ruled a homicide. I'm happy to report that John K. Miller is in custody here in the Dunn County Jail for her murder 50 years later. I can't thank Karen and David from Ramapo College enough for their assistance in this case and for being here today.
John Miller was found to be the contributor through IGG of the DNA collected from the crime scene. An interesting part about this date, which was November 4th of 2024, also would have been Mary's 76th birthday. On November 7th, 2024, we interviewed John Miller at his home, where he subsequently confirmed his involvement in the death of Mary Schlais.
Miller reportedly admitted that after he picked up Mary, he'd made a sexual advance, and that when she rebuffed him, he grabbed a knife in his passenger seat visor and viciously stabbed her to death. He then attempted to hide her body in a snowbank, but got scared when he saw another vehicle drive past him and left the area, admitting that he must have lost his hat at that time. Today, John Miller faces a first-degree murder charge. A court date has not yet been set.
Karen, I just remember us talking, and I don't know if you remember this, like a couple years ago, you were so excited to make this move and like the potential and the opportunity and it just really, I'm just so happy for you. Congratulations. Of course, I know you worked with the other team members, but like solving this kind of case, I mean, have you guys had an uptick in people like wanting to, like, what's been the fallout from that, the positive fallout?
Well, this was the first lead that we gave that resulted in an arrest. So that was very, very exciting, especially given how old this cold case was. The suspect is still living, confessed to the crime. It was a big deal. But at least for me, I'm not going to speak for all three of us, I'm still until we get through trial and conviction, I'm still gonna not fully, dive into thinking that this is resolved, because really those pieces have to come together in order for us to be on the side of justice. Honestly, we've worked on cases where we're assisting the defense, and we've worked with cases where we're assisting the prosecution or the state, and so it's not over yet, but news coverage on this case was fantastic. We had many applicants to our certificate program. Am I allowed to say that we have a show coming up? We have a TV show in development. So that's it's an exciting period of growth for us as an organization.
The Ramapo team discusses what it was like meeting some of Mary's family at that recent press conference.
It is nice to see what a huge part that we played in their lives when we do get a chance to meet them. I think it's just a very special thing to be able to have that interaction and just see how our work affected their lives too.
And the team has a plea for those who want to help with this important work.
Important to let people know that if they want to help us work on these crimes and, Don and Jane Does, to please, please, please upload to GenMatch and also Family Tree DNA, because those are the only two databases that we have access to. And if you're in Ancestry, if you're in 23andMe, we're not going to see you. So having your DNA in GenMatch and Family Tree DNA is the only way that's going to help us resolve these cases.
And if you want to learn more about how to do that, or about our work in general, about our certificate program, our online programs, our in-person programs, our conference, ramapo.edu/IGG is our website. That's ramapo.edu/IGG. And that has all the information on how you can help us by uploading your own DNA profile, by making a donation, and by joining our programs.
I asked David about people who have real concerns about privacy when sharing their genetic information.
Every single thing that people are afraid of happening with their DNA can be much more easily exploited using the information that we find in public records. We use DNA as a starting point. It is a tiny part, ultimately, of the work that is done in IGG. The vast majority of work is genealogy. That means looking at records that are publicly available to anyone. And we can find out everything about your family and your history if we wanted to. All of that information is out there for anybody to find. Anybody with an Ancestry account, anybody with a Facebook account, they can find all of that. There is a relatively limited amount of information we can get from the DNA. All we see is how much DNA is shared and where is it shared on the chromosome. That's pretty much it. So if you're afraid of things like insurance companies using this information against you, well, first of all, there's a federal law that forbids that, using genetic information. And secondly, if insurance companies really want to know about your propensity for disease, they could just do your genealogy and find out how your parents died and your grandparents died. So I think people's fears are really misplaced about this, given the amount of information that is just available, waiting to be found by anybody who wants to find it. The longer that I've been in this field, the less I've been able to think of nefarious things that could actually be done with DNA. That doesn't mean that there's no privacy issues at stake. We are very careful in protecting the privacy of the matches that we utilize in our cases. We're not looking at the DNA sequence and seeing the base pairs and all that stuff. That's not the kind of access we have. So we protect it, but we also recognize its limited utility. It's just pointing us in the right direction to start looking at the public records, from which we can discover everything and anything about a lot more people than you might expect.
This case was solved by a lot of hardworking folks dedicated to helping victims and their families get resolution and hopefully justice.
Lastly, we have talked a lot about the facts of this investigation, those involved, and what it took to resolve this case. But we don't want to forget that this is about justice for Mary and bringing her family closure. Mary can be remembered as an accomplished artist, equestrian, sister, aunt, and daughter.
Up next, criminal mischief bonus content. Here, my co-host Brandon Morgan and I will discuss the case in more detail. And if you have a minute, head on over to Apple Podcasts to rate and review the show. Tell a friend about us. It really helps. And as always, thank you so much for listening. From Cloud 10, Criminal Mischief is a pie-in-the-sky production recorded in the beautiful Pacific Northwest. We're produced by Brandon Morgan and myself. Music by Soundstripe. I'm Cariolyn Osorio, your writer and host.